back to Ether Hour, everybody. I am your host, Conrad Franz, joined as always by Dmitry Kalyagin and our good friend, returning guest, Momcilo Nevesky. We have recorded multiple episodes with him in the past, of course, about MAGA communism and debunking Haz and the infrared collective nonsense, as well as discussing Codreanu, the Iron Guard, Romanian Orthodoxy and resistance to communism, his ideology, and possible future canonization. Be sure to check out those episodes in the links down below, as well as his other work. But with all of that, we're going to be returning to form, discussing the new American Communist Party, the new nonsense that Jackson Hinkle and Haz are up to, sort of the potential psyop roots of this ideology, why of course it's not compatible with orthodoxy, and a whole host of other issues about the rising, perhaps, tensions within the world of multipolarity and the ideological fissures that may be emerging there. So, Dmitry, great to be here with you. I'm glad to have Momcilo with us. Let's break this down.
Thank you for the introduction, Conrad. And, we're here again with Momcilo on our, I suppose, second episode of discussing MAGA communism, the infrared, the MAGA communist movement, and specifically we'll be focusing on the American Communist Party today, which their manifesto, their sort of draft charter, actually came out and dropped on the 22nd of July, 2024. Coincidentally, it actually came out on the same day as Biden announced that he will not be running for the 2024 presidential election in the US. So coincidentally, it's almost as if, in opposition to Kamala Harris and the standard Democratic Party, these American communists are looking to show themselves as a sort of left-wing alternative for various Americans to try to bring more, I suppose, communists under, and those who maybe are sympathetic towards socialism under their sort of wing and into their new movement. Now, naturally, the sort of primary spokespersons and leaders of the American Communist Party, as you can guess, are of course Infrared Haz and Jackson Hinkle, who are incredibly popular on X and Twitter and who push this sort of ideological nonsense and have been pushing it for at least 2 to 3 years now at this point. Now, there are real deep concerns as to their affiliations with, various secret service organizations around the world, but I think primarily here we'll be breaking down how faulty and how deviant this particular ideology is and some of the dangers that it may pose domestically for Americans, as well as probably even to right-wing Christian movements in America, as well as Russia and other places. So Momcilo, it's good to have you here, and perhaps you could break down, what do you think the main pitfalls are and the dangers of the American Communist Party, this new organization which has essentially arisen seemingly out of nowhere and seems to have all of this support online, but how will it exactly play out on the ground, and what do you think the main issues are with this particular movement?
Well, it's interesting to note a couple of things about the start of the ACP, the American Communist Party. And the thing is with these groups, there's like a million communist parties in the USA. So there's a lot of acronyms we have to keep track of. But they are split actually from the CPUSA. And the CPUSA, that's like the mainline communist party that's been around for a very long time. I think even before like World War One, that ended up having ties to the Soviet Union throughout the Cold War. And every 4 years, the CPUSA has a national convention. And just a few months ago, I believe, they had their 32nd national convention. But the years leading up to that convention, Haz, Infrared, and those people, they had this project that they wanted to do of sort of infiltrating CPUSA and trying to basically overtake it or something to that effect. But instead of being able to do that during this last convention, I'm not too sure how accurate this story is, but according to Haz, Infrared, and those people, they basically said that the CPUSA went against its own bylaws, broke all sorts of conventions to sort of exclude the infrared people from having a voice. And basically the main gripe that the infrared people had against CPUSA was that they were doing what's called tailism, which is when you try to like tail the Democratic Party in certain aspects to try to like, gain support from it instead of being a sort of revolutionary, Marxist-Leninist party. So after the debacle with the 32nd National Convention with the CPU, the ACP formed out of this, and allegedly a bunch joined them. How true that is, I'm not too sure, because there was a statement released by the Communist Party USA that, let me get the quote here. They, meaning like Haz and the ACP, they claim to have splintered from the Communist Party USA after our 32nd National Convention, bringing with them 26 clubs, or basically local chapters. Please be aware, no such splintering has taken place, nor have 26 clubs left the party to form a new one. Rather, this is a small, exclusively online movement. And I've seen some other places as well that there might be some dubiousness to their claim that all these clubs from the CPUSA have really joined them. And then there's also the question of like, how active are these clubs in actuality, given that the Communist Party USA itself was kind of small to begin with. It's even smaller than the Libertarian Party. So to have a handful of like, local state clubs in various, cities that no one has ever really heard of for the most part, claim to have joined you. It's kind of questionable how many people would even join, even if these allegations are true. And then there was another split as well that happened with what's called the PCUSA. So the PCUSA stands for Party of Communist USA. And this is a really old split from CPUSA back in, I believe, 1919 or, sometime in the early 20th century. And there was a couple of guys who left there. One of them is even on the board of Haz's ACP. Let me get his name here. Christopher Halali, I believe is his name. And he's kind of in charge of dealing with their international segments or international relations. For instance, I believe they're trying to get a bilateral ideological statement with the Russian Communist Party signed, and he's supposed to be in charge of that. So that's really kind of the origin of the ACP, and as well as, Haz has kind of amassed a following from, infrared, his YouTube, his streaming, his debates, sort of, his Twitter, all of that. So he's trying to bring that along with him, I would imagine. However, in terms of what they're actually trying to do, it's really not too clear, because if you look at their declaration that they have, which is, it kind of has Haz's signature all over it, in the sense that there's a lot of like really turgid sentences and kind of awkward phrases and very dense but more or less meaningless sentences all over it. It's kind of hard to see what they want to do. Mainly what they want to do is usurp CPUSA's claim to be the American vanguard Communist Party. And basically they say that they have forsaken the role because of their incompetency, and that the ACP is going to overtake them now. And it's filled with a lot of like kind of Marxist jargon.
When you read these documents, it's all a bunch of the same pablum that, they try to trot out in this very declaratory, they all imagine themselves as Lenin, standing in Red Square, preaching to all of the people, despite the fact that, like you mentioned, Momcilo, all of the people that they're fighting against in these communist inter-party battles are, Gen X and boomers, and, they're kind of more interested in affecting the mainstream discourse. But I think the fact that they brand themselves with the MAGA ideology, that they have tried to pursue, I guess, middle Americans, the people that put Trump in the White House in 2016 in their targeting of their, I guess, the population that they want to reach in America, that obviously puts them immediately on the back foot when they try to interact with these standard socialist communist types who, frankly, always, in my experience, put the social liberalism and the deconstruction of, the establishment social mores and meta-narratives, like with gender and race and all of these things, before they actually put the economic proclamations of true Marxist-Leninism and these other things. And I, of course, saw Hinkle and Haz in Russia when I was there in Moscow for the International Russophiles Conference. And the fact that, and frankly, they were there with a huge amount of Chinese people and all of these other Russian communist-adjacent people that are in kind of the Eurasian movement. And while there were definitely people there that were in favor of multipolarity that would not have identified as communists, that were still friendly with them, after the trip, I remember listening to Haz and Hinkle talking, and they all talked about how they were really enamored with the Chinese communists. And then after that, I remember for at least 3 weeks, all they wanted to talk about was Maoism and how Mao was actually their real inspiration. And then, Russia gets back in the news and Stalin becomes the main guy again. And one thing I've noticed is that very recently, when they released this American Communist Party sort of declaration, they immediately announced support from the Communist Party in Russia, which, again, they're not governing like United Russia, so it may not be quite as under the eye of the federal government as somebody working with Putin or working with Medvedev or other members of the actual ruling party in the Federation. The fact that they are just so brazenly and openly working with very nationalistic and pro-Russian apparatchiks within the Russian state, and then are able to just freely travel to these countries, face no scrutiny, like anybody who, of course, operates on the right wing does in American politics faces from, the feds, is very suspicious. But obviously we can talk about all of those things, but
Thank you for listening to this free segment of the 8th Hour. For the full subscriber-only episode, make sure to check out our World War Now Substack in the video description. In the complete episode, we discuss deeper foreign political implications of the American Communist Party, ground roots rise in traditional Christian resistance to globalism, and the potential implications of Orthodox canonizations in Europe on communist historiography and the communist ideology as a whole. We again thank you for your support, and thank you for subscribing.